It is Sunday, June 16th, 2019. And my name is Michael James Ott, and I'm hosting the Pro and Con Show. So 15 minutes, 20 minutes every day, just talking about the issues, trying to encourage dialogue and thought amongst us regular folk. With the intent of, really encouraging everyone to be focused on the facts, so the who, the what, the where, the when, and regardless of what stream of information comes to you, recognize that a big chunk of it is opinion, analysis, whatever, and as part of that then comes a fair amount of bias, unfortunately. So there's websites that are more left-leaning and some that are more right-leaning and some that are more centrist, but the key thing is to get the facts yourself and then try to form your own conclusions. And so a lot of the shows I go through and I look at like 5 different websites, the ones that I sample: Huffington Post, CNN, NPR, National Public Radio, and then Fox News and Breitbart. And that's kind of the spectrum from left to right, if you will. But some of the shows, there's not that much going on, or some of the news has been kind of repetitive, and there continues to be this ongoing clash between Mr. Trump and Congress over trying to get information on Mr. Trump or about his activities, because there is at least some inference that there's been some less than scrupulous activities, and so whether or not it's true, time will bear out. And again, I hope that I would strongly encourage you to look at different websites, different news streams on television, to try to get the pro and the con, the good and the bad, the for and against, and hence the Pro and Con Show. Well, today I wanted to just talk about healthcare, because this is one of the things that has been an ongoing discussion, and I am not even going to begin to pretend that I'm going to offer like the full-blown final solution. I think that comes from our government, with us enforcing it, encouraging it, strongly encouraging our representatives to sit down for a handful of days and have open public hearings on this, the whole healthcare issue, and gets subject matter experts from the various parties that participate in this, and try to dig the facts out of this and get them in a way that you and I can understand where the costs are coming from. And so I'll tell you, there are certain things that certainly smell of I don't know, corruption. I don't know, greed. I don't know what it is, but for example, insulin. So insulin has been produced for decades, and there might be variations of insulin now that maybe they've been reformulated a little bit, so maybe they're like a slower release insulin, these kinds of things. But the reality is that insulin has been available for those folks that suffer from diabetes for decades. And while some formulations or something might be better, there certainly has been insulin around for a long time. And but here of late, the cost to people who have to use insulin has been skyrocketing. And obviously, there's something. To me, it's obvious. I'm hoping that you would also say, why? Why, after decades of production of it's not at least in the forms that were used for decades, not a very complicated thing. So why the high costs, and okay, maybe there's variations of insulin, and why wouldn't there be low cost variants that were the same that were produced 10 or 15 years ago available, as well as the higher cost ones if there's some kind of advantage. But at least the thing should be available at a reasonable cost, you know, to anyone suffering from diabetes, which of course is unfortunate for one and all that suffers from that disease. Well, so part of this would be, okay, what's going on with the pharmaceutical companies, what's going on, and just, you know, here's some specific things like insulin that if we were to dig deep on specific things, I think we'd find out the root cause of a lot of the increasing healthcare costs. Well, the other thing that I wanted to do was I've been contemplating. I'm hoping that a lot of you are also. But what would be the framework for a potential solution to make healthcare better and more affordable? So part of it certainly is understanding where some of the costs come from, and I'm going to touch on one part of that here in a moment. So that would be part of it, and understanding, you know, when in our lifetimes these costs occur, and what's driving the costs, and you know, prescription drugs, for example, and so on. But the other part is, well, should we have kind of a national healthcare thing, so that because right now there's you know, millions and millions of Americans that have no health care insurance. They basically have no coverage, and they and you know, we've been arguing for, unfortunately, years over this. So and unfortunately, again, you know, I'm advocating that we need to talk to our representatives and say, look, you know, stop the bickering, stop you know, your rifle shot approach to, oh, I'm going to advocate for this kind of policy, or I'm going to pass a bill that does this tiny little thing. We need to step back and look at this in the bigger, broader picture, and to spend some days doing that, and then decide how to go forward. This is what I'm advocating. So one of the things, so just to give, so I started looking at the miracle of the internet. You can go in there, you can find information. And I found an old paper from 2004, so it's 15 years old. But basically, the paper had some nice data in it. And I didn't take the time to research multiple papers, but a lot of this seems to feel about right and ring approximately true based on other information that I've had in the past, articles that I've read. So just as an approximation, just to kind of advance the discussion, how about we just use these numbers as good approximations, and not get wrapped too much in the exact dollar amounts, okay? So anyway, what they were saying is that the average lifetime, so this is a paper that's 15 years old, so let's say it's gone up some, but roughly $300,000 in healthcare costs on average in the lifetime of the average American. And okay, so maybe it's 400,000 now. Okay, well, let's just pick a number. So let's say 400,000. That's a nice round number. Okay, $400,000 is the lifetime cost. And what you see is that there's a little bit of it when you're first born, especially if you know, the C-section, these kinds of things, and the early care and pregnancy care and that kind of stuff. There's a little bit there. There's almost nothing for, it's very, very low percentage from the time we're born, from, you know, on average, through the early years of our lives, childhood and into early adulthood. And so this information, and again, should be relatively correct. Says that if you're 20 years old and you're an average American, about 94% of your lifetime healthcare costs are still in front of you. Okay, so if you're alive and you're 20 years old and you're a U.S. citizen, approximately 94% of your healthcare expenditures are in front of you. So when you hit 40, it's still like 83% roughly. This is what this says. So, and then here's the interesting thing. So if you're 65 and you're a living U.S. citizen, you still have about 60% of your lifetime healthcare costs ahead of you. And if you're 85, if you have lived to age 85, you're alive and you're a U.S. citizen, you still have about 36% of your lifetime healthcare costs ahead of you. Now, what does this data say? Well, it really says that there's a huge chunk of lifetime healthcare costs that come at the end of our lives. That comes at the end of our lives. And the question that I put to you, just so you might mull it over, okay? We have definitely, humans and we in America, we value human life, no question. I value human life tremendously. I'm sure you do if you're watching this video. We value human life. And, you know, one of the things, and again, just to kind of think about a little bit here, when we get older and older, the amount of lifetime that we have left and the quality of the life that we have left is going down, correct? And anyone, I hope you don't disagree with that. If you're 85 years old, you're not going to live to be 185. You're going to maybe live to be 90 or 95 or something like that. And also, you know, your physical skills, your mental skills will be, you know, degrading. This is just the human condition. And so what I'm wondering is, should we look at those end-of-life costs in a different way than costs earlier on, as far as like a national healthcare system? And maybe, and again, just to ponder, maybe toward the end, the healthcare system would be less likely to pay for services and stuff like that than it would at the beginning, when you know, early in life, where there was, you know, a much more future life to be led. So that's one part. So then the other thing that I wanted to say is, I think that Social Security, for the most part, has worked pretty darn well. I mean, we haven't, you know, I don't know that we actually fund it properly. We might have been able to, you know, administrate it better over the years. But fundamentally, the fundamental concept of having kind of this, you know, because people struggle with saving for retirement. And so because it's kind of our nature to struggle with that, we established Social Security. It's kind of a basic thing. And yes, it can be fairly austere, but at least it's there. It's something. It's intended to provide, you know, a safety net. And to the extent that we've used it as that and administered it that way, it's been a good thing. I mean, I think on the whole, my observation of all the other people, my parents' retirements, everyone else's retirements, and so on, having Social Security has been a good thing. And so in that model, the same thing could be said for healthcare. That especially when we're young, we're not, and one of the big complaints about the Affordable Care Act was that young people didn't want to spend anything for insurance because they didn't feel like they needed. And of course, the data says that they don't then, but they will in the future. So much in the same way that Social Security provides kind of a minimalist safety net for retirement and our later years, it would seem to make sense. A proposal would be that we would have a similar safety net kind of thing for healthcare. That there would be a lifetime benefit where certainly certain minimum healthcare things would be available to you. So, for example, if you're 22 years old and you happen to be at work and something happens, or maybe you're not at work, maybe you're at home and you fall off a porch or something and you need some surgery because you've broken a rib and maybe the rib has entered into one of your lungs or something, so you need a fairly significant acute surgery kind of thing and a few days of hospitalization. Well, right now, there's many young people that would have to try to pay for that out of pocket, and it's a huge cost, and it would really ruin their lives to have that indebtedness upon them at that point. So basically what I'm suggesting is that there could be this safety net where those costs, a significant portion of them, would be covered by the lifetime healthcare cost, and you would pay into the system just like Social Security. The Social Security would be the exact analog, the exact model, and we would just follow along that, and then it's a discussion about, well, what things do you care for and what things don't you care for, and just how expensive are the treatments and the longevity of the treatments. Another way that occurred to me, and again, just for people to be thinking about, is maybe Social Security should be this way too. Maybe there's a lifetime benefit in absolute dollars, and when that's gone, it's pretty much gone. Okay, so for example, for healthcare, just to follow that thread, and again, just to be thinking, to think about options. Not saying that that's what we would do, but you have a dialogue. So let's say that we decide that this minimum benefit, healthcare benefit, should be the equivalent of $200,000 or $150,000, but let's just say $200,000. Okay. So then what happens is then that's kind of an account for you, and when you're younger, you can decide, are you, there could be elective surgeries or something that you may or may not want, or there could be whatever diseases or something, and you could decide. And then maybe most importantly, toward the end of life, maybe you've only spent $50,000 up to some point, and you've got $150,000 left in your lifetime benefit, and you're 90 years old, and now you are diagnosed with cancer, and you can decide whether, well, do I want to spend that benefit, or could, especially if we had it in the system, could I give that benefit, bequeath it to someone else, or transfer it to someone else and not use it myself, and depending on your condition at the moment, that may or may not make sense, right? So everyone would have to think that through in their own personal circumstances with their families and friends and so on, and of course themselves. Well, anyway, running out of time, so this has been the Pro and Con Show. This show just, again, trying to encourage a little bit of discussion around healthcare and this idea of a safety net, a healthcare safety net kind of thing, and just to hopefully cause some thought and some discussion, and yeah, let's see in the end, how do we go forward together, right? Because all the laws cover all of us. All right, so for Sunday, June 16th, 2019, I'm Michael James Ott. Bye for now.